It's Toronto's podcast on the Canada's Podcast Network.
Today, we are with Andrea Sesum, founder of the Ontario College of Business and Law, co-founder of Technology Factory, dedicated coffee enthusiast, passionate entrepreneur, board member, author, keynote speaker, and a winner of several diversity awards. So, Andrea, welcome. And we're going to kick off by you just telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you're driving at the moment. Okay, that's not necessarily to the car, that's the company. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, I would love to do that, Philip. So my name is Andrea Sesum, and I came to Canada as a refugee 14 years ago. And today I am the founder and president of Ontario College of Business and Law. And I'm also founder of a non-for-profit association called Women's Paralegal Association of Ontario, for which I have won a prestigious City of Toronto award called Access, Equity, and Human Rights Award, and I'm really proud of that.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So you're an entrepreneur. Just tell me a little bit about the business you do, the business you're in. How you've grown it and why you're in it, basically. In fact, we were talking earlier, and I loved what you said. I'll just let everyone know. When you went to school, it wasn't a question of what would you do after it. You always knew you were going to be an entrepreneur. So we'll get back to your company. So does that mean you're wired differently than normal people? I mean, that's kind of, I'm sure a lot of people would think, huh? You wanted to go straight into being an entrepreneur? What?
I love that question. And I've heard you ask that previous guest that you had on your podcast. And your question actually really made me think. And I tried to analyze myself and say, was I actually wired differently? Or was this something that was acquired? And I thought about it. I think, and I'm speaking only for myself, of course, I think that exposure, my family is an entrepreneurial family. I grew up watching entrepreneurs. My grandfather was an entrepreneur who owned a boutique shop, and he used to make handmade ties. So I watched him run his business, run his boutique. And for me, my mom later took over the family business. So that was something that I always knew as a child. And, I felt comfortable with entrepreneurship versus someone, I think, who might have watched their parents, work in a corporate world, go to Monday to Friday job. So I think entrepreneurship is, I think the more exposed you are to entrepreneurs and to entrepreneurship as a concept as a whole, and the earlier you're exposed to it, I think that will sort of drive you wanting to become an entrepreneur. So for me, it was natural. It was never, I always knew, I did corporate jobs while I was completing my school, but I always knew that was temporary. And I always knew that as soon as I was finished with school, I would be opening my own business.
So you've been an entrepreneur all of your adult life, basically.
Oh, since I was seven, 8 years old. Yes, yes.
Okay. Why law? And how did you actually get started? You mean you're a refugee, you come to Canada, that puts you in somewhat. I'm an immigrant too, a little different, but. It definitely puts you in a, you're not from Canada, you never grew up here, you've got no knowledge. How did you get started? I mean, I can guess why law, because you're helping people that are, going through the same things that you did when you came here. But, how did you actually get started?
So my journey, I saw the hardship that, immigrants have of finding the right resources. That was when we came, finding the right resources, knowing the law, and sometimes being disadvantaged because they didn't know the law. So having gone through that journey, I decided that I wanted to educate myself and I wanted to know the law. And once I did, I went further and I said, now I want to specialize in immigration, which I did. And that was, in fact, to help other immigrants come to Canada and help them through their journey. So I opened my own practice. I had a large legal firm that I ran for about 10 years. And I was also teaching part-time at public and private colleges. I co-wrote or co-authored a book that's being used in colleges as well. And I did a lot of mentorship, which made me realize that I love teaching. So through the teaching at different colleges, I found out that the current system could be more innovative. It could be made a little bit better. And usually you say when the system is broken, make your own system or create your own system. So seeing the opportunity to innovate education, to innovate the programs, I decided in 2013 to found, and I did, a private career college.
Okay. So you founded the college, and how long have you been in business now? With the college?
So since 2013, and this would be our 7th year.
7th year. Well, that's pretty solid. You're through that first 3 years, and those which are the crazy years. So that's pretty good. So why Toronto? You know, let's move to the now. You know, why do that in Toronto?
I've been living in Toronto ever since I came to Canada. I've been lucky enough to live in the city. I love the city. I also see the opportunities. People are great, networking, a lot of opportunities, generally in Ontario as well, not just Toronto, of course.
Well, like, you know, why would you, I mean, it's the, you know, this is the Toronto podcast. You know, what would make you recommend Toronto to others versus maybe, you know, other cities across the country or in the US? Because we have a lot of, especially, you know, border listeners basically in the United States.
So Toronto has become a hub of everything, I think. All the events, the big events, all the jobs, I could say, and all the networking and mentoring, it's all happening in Toronto. It's alive. You can really find a lot of opportunities.
Okay. So let's move a bit more to, you know, you as the entrepreneur, and I ask this of lots of people. A lot of our best ideas come, you know, when we least expect them, which usually doesn't mean during the day when we're grinding away doing the day-to-day. Now, how do you disconnect? How do you recharge? How do you get inspired? Which you got to be if you're an entrepreneur. You have to have those periods of inspiration that really bring the vision to keep going forward.
Well, I listen to your podcast, of course, but aside from that, I love to travel. I found that traveling really helps me disconnect. And even though it's really hard to disconnect for an entrepreneur, I do ensure, you know, that I'm limited in terms of the amount of work that I do while I'm traveling. We also love to spend time outdoors. We love RVing. We also took up sailing this year. So, you know, we're very outdoorsy, and I think with nature and just being outside helps me disconnect away from technology.
So I don't know whether to ask you this, because you've always been an entrepreneur. I was about to say, what's the best thing or things about being an entrepreneur? But if you've always been an entrepreneur, then forget that question.
It's a way of life. It's really, I think entrepreneurship is a life skill.
Yeah.
I call it a life skill.
Yeah, that's right. What are you most excited about in your business these days? Your specific business, not business generally, but but your business.
A lot of things to be excited about. We're introducing more and more innovative programs to meet the skill demand of the future of work. We're in the process of opening our second campus, which we're doing that to focus more on the demand of the technology education and technology skills. So that's very exciting. So that's a big project actually that's taking up a lot of our time these days.
So what are the top 3 things on your bucket list, vision board, whatever you call it, right now?
So one of the top things was to be on a podcast, so that's a check. The other one, it's more my bucket list is more of a personal things versus accomplishments in the career. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we took up sailing and we did all the licenses that go with it. And a plan is to do circumnavigation, possibly one day, when we have more time. So just sail around the world, do a 360 and see all the wonderful places. And
that's a great objective. Yeah, that's a great objective. Okay.
Thank you.
That's pretty cool. What's the greatest challenge you've faced in the business so far? 7 years? What's you've? I'm sure you've hit more than one. What's the big one that that you think, my God, if it didn't overcome that, I wouldn't be here at the moment?
There was a point where you think can I actually do this? And I think everyone has that certain point in their journey as an entrepreneur where you sort of say, maybe it's easier if I, exit at this time, will I be able to continue on? So for me, the big challenge came, into a second or third year of the business, and there was a point where I thought, maybe I really can do this. So I think one of the most important things in being an entrepreneur is the persistence, and that's what I learned. If you are persistent and you're disciplined, no matter how hard things get, and they do get hard, you only listen and hear about the success stories, and you never hear about how hard it is to get to that point of success. And if I can say one thing about one important thing about being an entrepreneur is to keep at it. Be persistent, be disciplined, and if you fail, it's okay to fail as long as you learn from your mistakes and you move on and you do it better.
So when you hit a challenge, particularly, have you kind of got a particular process that you kind of step through to overcome them? I mean, some don't, some do. You've obviously hit more than one in the last 7 or 8 years. Have you started to say, oh, this is a process? It's a great learning thing if you can pass that on to people.
Yeah, I think it's important not to be alone in the process. So surround yourself with people that can bring value to your thought process. So if you come across a challenge, and if I see and I need a second opinion, or the challenge is too big for me, or I don't know which way to go, I get people involved. So I will ask I will ask for second opinions. I will bounce the ideas off, because everyone has a different perspective and everyone comes from a different perspective. So I like to hear from other people in terms of how they, and I may not choose any of their, suggestions or advice, but at least it broadens my perspective on how to better solve the challenge.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one, Philip. I think it would be to be more confident. If you have an idea, be more confident. Life is too short. It's okay to fail. It's okay to try. If you don't try, you'll always say, well, I could have done this, or I wish I had done this. Just try. If you have a business idea, I say don't pitch it, just do it. Just bring your idea to life.
Built the business successfully. What kind of gem of advice would you give somebody that's thinking about it that might help, that you think might help them? Persistence, you've said, not to be scared of things, but is there something, more less high level than that, maybe a little bit more, pragmatic?
So I think, everyone has an idea. Usually people will have 10 great ideas, but if you don't execute any of them, what good are they? So if you have an idea and you're wondering if you should start a business, it's better to start earlier than later or never. I say give it a try, but you also have to remember that it may not work in a year. It may not work in 2 years. You have to be persistent, and it's important to have a network of great people around you, mentors, people who come from different backgrounds and can give you various different perspectives. And someone you can reach out to and say, hey, now I'm working on this. What are your thoughts on it? But just do it. What's the worst thing that can happen? Really?
Okay. Kind of reciprocal of that is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received? And I love asking this question because it's gotten some fantastic answers,
The best piece of advice that I ever received. When I shared my thoughts on, and this was a critical advice. So when I shared my thoughts on wanting to start or open a private career college, I shared this with another individual who was also in the education sector, and I was told not to do it. Don't get it into this business. It's tough. You'll never make it. So that was the critical advice, which formed me into entrepreneur that I am today and a founder of a private career college. I took it on as a challenge. So the critical advice that I received, I took it on as a challenge, and it made me even more determined to open a private career college.
That's interesting. So, what I would say is bad advice, just, treat it as bad advice. So that's about it. I could be a little bit more blunt, but that's fine. So we're going to just do some very quick rapid fire questions. Don't think too much about them.
Okay.
And sometimes you won't have answers, sometimes you will. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I would probably be working in a non-for-profit on a larger scale, just giving back to people and leaving a footprint on the humanity.
Okay, that's a good statement. What book are you currently reading, listening to, and what would you recommend to the audience?
there's not a particular book that I'm reading. I'm more listening. I find it really helpful listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
And more of the other entrepreneurship or journeys from other people. And I really find value in that. So I've been doing that for I could say past year. Okay. And I've learned a lot, and it's actually helped me, even though it may not be the same industry as mine. It really helped me in terms of some of my own decisions.
Yeah. Okay. You a morning or night person?
I'm a night person. At night, it's like a highway in my head with flashing lights. You know, everybody's asleep. And as soon as everybody's asleep and it's 11 o'clock, some of my brightest and best ideas, you know, I have a notepad, which is right here. And that's the notepad that I use. And I just write the ideas. And in the morning, some of them, you know, may not work, but majority do.
If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be and why?
Persistent. I don't take a no for an answer.
That's a common one. I think that's definitely part of the chemistry of entrepreneurship. What's keeping you up at night?
Ideas. It's funny.
Although you don't go to bed, obviously, because you work at night. That's what I'm fine.
Exactly. So it's the ideas that, you know, keep coming at night. I guess when I'm relaxed, and you know, that's what keeps me up at night. And not enough time then to execute those ideas overnight.
So you like to travel. What's your most favorite place in the world?
Oh,
you might have been there. It may be that you want to get there. So you don't have to have been there. But
can I have three? I love them just the same. The last year we visited Barcelona. And Barcelona, you know, I fell in love with because it's so vibrant. People are great. Culture is great. Food is amazing. So Barcelona is something that, you know, I recently fell in love with. Santorini is where we went for a honeymoon. So Santorini is very dear to my heart. And of course, any city in my former country of Croatia. Okay. So Dubrovnik, any coastal city.
We used to go holidays in Raven, just to give you
oh, wow.
when it was Yugoslavia. Okay. What are the three non-negotiables that have to happen in your morning or evening routine? If you have any, some people don't. I mean, you don't have to. If you don't have them, then that's fine.
I don't think I have.
Okay.
I don't think I have them.
I don't particularly either, except for coffee in the morning. That's about it.
Well, coffee is a must in the morning. So I guess I have one non-negotiable, and I have it here.
How could you not come from where you are and not have coffee in the morning?
Here we go, coffee. Exactly.
So the island question you've heard, but we'll do it again. There's a small tropical island in the middle of the ocean with only one phone booth and no internet. We drop you off with no technology. At any time, you can use the phone on the island to call a boat to come and pick you up. How long do you last before making the phone call, and what would you do until then?
Oh, I think I mentioned earlier when we just began the interview. I love outdoors. I love the ocean, and I like to disconnect. So I think I would last pretty long. But again, I love to disconnect for a certain period of time because I have to know what's happening. So I'd say I would last maybe more than an average, so a month.
That's a long time. That's good.
But that is if I have a sunscreen. That's the one condition. Sunscreen and coffee.
Okay, you know that great interview. Thank you for it. I always like you know, our listeners or viewers often want to contact the people that they've heard. How can they get hold of you online?
Of course. I love connecting with people, networking. I think it's very important to do that, especially for entrepreneurs, because we often feel alone. So they can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Just send me a message, let me know who you are and why I would like to connect. We're also on Facebook, Ontario College of Business and Law. So I would be happy to hear from some other entrepreneurs and, their journeys.
That's great. Thank you, Andrea, and thank everyone for listening or viewing. We have, I think, more viewers these days than just listeners. So till next time, it's Phil Bliss and Andrea from Canada's podcast.
Thank you.